Welcome back to MB Capital Strategies. Today we have the portfolio update for the period of November 2025. Let's take a look at the current situation. A total of 71,089 euros invested, current portfolio value 74,648 euros, capital gain 3,172 euros and 30 cents, dividends 4,693 euros and 25 cents. And a realized loss of 564 euros and 6 cents, current internal rate of return at 10.52%. All right, we'll definitely take a look in a moment at what delivered the top performance. Let's just quickly go through my portfolio in general for the month of November. What has changed a bit? Currently, CMB Tech is one of my largest positions with a total investment of 2,261 euros and 78 cents. Next come Flex, LNG, Tungela, Dorian, LPG, Torm, and Equipetrol, as you can clearly see here. Then we have Medical Property Trust and Petrobras. Exactly, but that's not really the focus today. Today is really about all the distributions. Let's just take a quick look at what was forecasted for this period. November. Overall, the dividend I received wasn't that high, totaling 182 euros and 44 cents. So let's just take a look here, shall we? Let's go through the top payers. Here we have Verizon with 7%, where I received 2 euros and 99 cents. Then Campbell Soup with 5.68 and Universal with 6.35%. Then AKBP with 10.62%, a total of 8.09 euros. And then we also have here Riley Exploration Permian with 5.91% and 9 euros and 35 cents. Shugang Fushan with 9.2% and 3 euros and 25 cents. British American Tobacco with 5.74%, totaling 12 euros and 98 cents. Then we also have China Water Affairs with 5.34% and 4 euros and 99 cents. Then VOC Energy Trust with 15.4% and 4.26 euros. Then Herc Autoliners with 5 euros and 64 cents. Hercules Capital. Petrobras MIT 8 euros and 37 cents. Then APA with a total of 7 euros and 60 cents. Then we have Kimball Royalty Partners with 2 euros and 73 cents. Then we have Equinor here for 5 euros and 10 cents. But Really Trust at 18 euros and 36 cents. Then we also have Indu with 14.16%, MIT 5.09 euros. Then we have Champion Iron with 7 euros and 94 cents. Exactly, those were roughly my highest payers. So I would say let's just take a quick look at the activities. So for the month of November, there were a total of 83 units. Purchased for a total of 1,409 euros and 72 cents. Dividends received 123 euros and 29 cents. And yes, so in total I received 123 euros and 29 cents in dividends. For the month of November, we have Play Oil, Jiangxi Copper, CF Industries. Let's just quickly go through the list. I would say let's just focus on the dividends first. And then we'll also take a look at the purchases and maybe also the sales. So for Play Oil, Jiangxi Copper, I'll just pick out some of the biggest ones in general. There we have Champion Iron with 5 euros and 70 cents. Coterra Energy with 2 euros and 10 cents. Then we have Really Trust with 13 euros and 57 cents. Then Gimbal Royalty Partners with 2 euros and 3 cents. Petrobras twice. Then we have Sarika Energy with 2 euros and 44 cents. Then Hercules Capital with 1 euro and 81 cents. Attic Coagro with 1 euro and 42 cents. UK Autoline with 2 euros and 64 cents. Cardinal Energy with 2 euros and 43 cents. China Water Affairs, Riley with 3 euros and 82 cents. Then Riley again with 3 euros and 8 cents. Then Banco Santander with 28 cents. Verizon again, and AKBP and Universal. Exactly, that's currently the overview of the dividends I've received. So not particularly much for this period. And then I would say let's just take a look at the purchases and sales also for the month of November. I bought Wilma International, Farmland Partners, increased my position in Tungala Resources, Flower Foods, Acadian Timber, Suncook Energy, and Diashow and Lionel Barcel Industries. Those were my additions because they were simply very undervalued. I'll take a quick look into December to see what has happened overall. In terms of buying and selling, I sold Vodafone because the dividend was recently cut, and I just took the price gain and will probably just reallocate the capital, or I've already reallocated it into other things. I also sold Iberdrola, also with a price gain. If you just take a moment to calmly look at it yourself, these aren't large amounts, but just a small adjustment in that regard. So let's just take a look at the Vodafone example. Here I realized a total gain of 35%, gross realized. That's €10.65, so as I said, not a huge amount. I had simply hoped that the dividend might be maintained and that we would also get a bit of a value play, of course. But now I've simply decided to sell this position and shift into other stocks. With Iberdrola, it's 65%. Here I took €14, simply for the reason that it wasn't a huge position. I just held a few shares there. It wasn't decisive for the dividend, and at the moment I couldn't buy more of that position either because it was already relatively high. And yes, in the end I also decided to simply sell, simply for the reason of reallocating it into other stocks that ultimately pay a bit more in dividends. Exactly, and I bought Pfizer because it's currently really at the bottom. I bought Verizon, Petrobras, Costco Shipping, Bank of China, Aberley Trust, Petrotal, Suncoke Energy, Equinor, Panoro Energy, and China Menschnu Diary. Exactly, those were basically my latest purchases now in December. Then let's just take a look at how my portfolio has developed during this period. But I would suggest that we just look at November now. So from the 1st of November to the 30th of November. But just so you can see what I've generally been doing. Overall, I had an unrealized capital gain of €1,131 here. Dividends of €123.30 during this period, in the end. So what were my top movers during this period? They were Bitex Energy with 40%, some integrated shipping with 36%, Barrick Mining, VF Corp, Anglo Gold Ashanti, and Fresnillo. Those were my top movers. And my top losers were actually Petrotal, which is why I bought more of it, AG Crows International, Mara Holdings, and Canacol Energy. Those are currently my losers during this period. Right, let me just quickly filter here by percentage price change to see what happened. And maybe you can spot some patterns here, or maybe not. So I think that especially in the last month, shipping stocks have really increased a lot. Global Shipley's, Wallenius Wilhelmsen, Himalaya Shipping. And also in integrated shipping, in general, shipping has really gained a few percentage points, but so have mining stocks, as you can see here. Exactly, that's the current situation. Let me just quickly adjust the time period, just so we can take a completely neutral look at the whole thing and see how it has developed overall over the entire period. Here again are the top performers. Fresnillo with almost 300%, Banco Santander with 170%, that was one of my first stocks. Then China Life Insurance with 140%, XPenG with 130%, and Barrick Mining. And that looks like this in terms of percentage price gains, as already mentioned above. Then Shangqi Copper with 115%, Newmont, Unilever Indonesia. I came across that one by chance. And currently up 90%, then there's one with 84%, another with 82%, SBM Offshore, of course. You can also see that sometimes the amounts aren't very high, but that's totally fine as well. Exactly, and I also mentioned Helmerich and Payne back then. They basically do the advertising for all the oil producers. Exactly, they offer drilling services and solutions for exploration and production companies. The company operates in 3 segments: North America Solutions, Offshore, Gulf of Mexico, and International Solutions. The company also focuses on the development, promotion, and marketing of technologies to improve drilling operations. Yes, and back then I thought I'd get in. Actually, that wasn't such a small move on my part, I would just say. Yes, current dividend yield is just under 3.55%. 5-year maximum dividend minus 11%. You also have to say that something like this always follows the cycle, just like the oil market. So when the oil market is doing well, Helmrich and Payne is also doing well, because of course more contracts are awarded to carry out more maintenance, etc., and so on. If, as is currently the case, oil prices are lower, then companies don't spend as much money for maintenance, or rather, maintenance always has to be done, but it's simply less because maybe not as much is running in general. During boom phases, of course, maintenance has to be done more frequently. Then with Alibaba here, then Katsa Brom, that's uranium, Dollar General. I mean, you generally know how I invest in that direction. Of course, I also have some smaller things that hardly have any value. I'll just add that, but some of it was simply speculation, just to ease the trend a bit. So that's what my portfolio currently looks like in November, or as of December 14th. And for the period of December, the dividend has now been practically updated. We're now at a total amount of €556.70. My top issuers here would be Pfizer, then here, Dorian LPG with €50.87, Torm with €58.46, UPS with €11, Global Ship Lease with €5.37, Sim Integrated Shipping with €13, Brazil Agro with €8.73, Panoro Energy with €8.13. Lex Long with €53, Dow with €7.45, MPC Container Ships with €11.27, BP with €13.07, €8.18 from Petrobras, BWLPG with €40.02, Nordic American Tankers with €10.50, Inegas with 20, International Seaways with 14, Ikers. Treasury bond pays me out at 4.76% at the moment, €10.71. Then Kraft Heinz with €6.81. Then Energy with €22. Western Union with €9.40. And Evolution Petroleum with €8.17. Yes, these are basically my highest payers for the month of December. Let's just take a look at how December developed in general. What I can already say a little bit now is that commodities are being sold off again somewhat, which is also reflected a bit in my portfolio. And in general, for next year, 2026, a dividend of €5,835.30 is being forecast for me here. I'm curious to see how the year 2026 will turn out. I would say that's it for the portfolio update for now. That was already a bit more detailed, maybe also from my perspective. You're also welcome to just go ahead and write in the comments whether you'd generally like me to talk more about my stocks, why I hold them, why I might not hold certain ones, or why I'm more active in this segment rather than in hard assets. You can just let me know if I should really go into more detail, what my basic thoughts are, why I hold these positions, and why I hold these amounts. Maybe also, just let me know, I'd love to hear from you. Then I can also go into that a bit more. I had also planned yes, let's say in January, just take you along and give you a complete overview of the whole process. So what am I currently working on? Maybe projects that are coming up, or what am I generally building at the moment? Also, so you can see what's going on in the background for me right now, if you're interested, of course. If not, that's totally fine too. But I think I'll just briefly show you so you can see what's generally happening. There's one more thing I wanted to show you. And of course, what's also very important is that this is not investment advice, but simply my personal strategy. Feel free to let me know what your numbers looked like for your month. November, what were your highest numbers? And how are you preparing for 2026? So as I already mentioned, let's take a quick look at that because I just discovered something else. So this is also a project I'm currently working on. That's right. It's my own little dashboard sort of where I catch some of the emails. And there was actually something quite interesting It's about the coal market, which is expected to reach 47.10 million in 2023. Precisely, with a high demand for polyester, and here it also reports a bit on who will likely be the biggest beneficiaries of this. That would be BASF, Chalep Petrochemical, Equate, Indorama, Ineos, LG Chem, Mitsubishi Chemical. Honestly, I haven't even heard of many of them, I have to admit. I have heard of AkzoNobel before, ExxonMobil of course, Dow as well, and LyondellBasell. Also, LyondellBasell has recently crashed just like Dow and actually BASF as well. And according to this analysis, these would simply be the ones who could benefit the most from it. Well, could benefit. This is just a general report for now. I can also go into more detail about this at some point if you'd like. What this whole thing is about, I built my own little dashboard terminal with the most important news about my stocks, topics like the dividend overview and so on. Because sometimes the question comes up, how do I manage all of this and how do I stay up to date? Yeah, sometimes you just have to build something yourself so that you can actually manage in the end. And I haven't entered all the stocks yet, because you actually have to do all of that manually. That's just how it is. And then I'll just be able to see things like, what is the dividend amount, what gets paid out, and what is my yield on costs. So did I invest better than the dividend? That gets paid out. Here, I've just listed everything out completely, which could be very interesting. But right now, it's really just a bit in the testing phase. I still have a lot to build. Unfortunately, I can't program. So right now, this is kind of generally in the testing phase. I definitely still need to work on it more. Build. At the moment, this is something like a macro analysis. Inflation is currently at 3%, then the money supply is at 4.65%, and the yield curve is at 0.62. I also always wrote down right away what it actually means. A steep curve, classic recovery phase after a recession, meaning the difference between 10 and 2-year stationary negative values, so an inverted curve, often also indicates an upcoming recession. Positive and rising spots indicate a recovery. Yes, I still need to add the VIX data. And then there's also a brief assessment. Market regime. Risk on, liquidity, and macro factors support risk assets. Inflation is elevated but not out of control. Neutral effect on risk assets. Inflation is elevated, not out of control. Exactly, so the money supply is expanding, liquidity and support for risk assets. The yield curve is clearly normalizing, which indicates economic recovery. Yes, and I just want to have something like that, where I can take a quick look at everything at a glance. And then I also have here a brief assessment, for example, like the financial sector is cheap, industry is also cheap, and with real estate it's kind of mixed, so you have to be selective. Staples and yes, the health sector is outperforming, undervalued, capital is flowing in, accumulation, capital is flowing out, blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm currently working on something like this and I'm just curious to see how it turns out. I'm also currently building a small dividend dashboard like this. And yes, I've already talked a little bit about what I want to do, so the next thing, yes, in the next video in general, but that's how it will ultimately turn out. So I'm working on a lot of things. And that also costs me time. That means I also gladly take the time for you here with situation and freight data for my shipping sector. It just takes a really long time because not everything is that simple. I also always have to read up on things myself, which costs me nerves as well, and well, that's just how things are. I also chose them myself. What could be interesting for you as well? You know, I'm heavily invested in the shipping industry. I've even built my own calculators here by now, for example, for dividend growth. Calculators, a purely West calculator trip, so all calculations are done with real data. Effect through reinvestment, financial freedom. And a dividend snowball calculator as well. Why do I do this? There's a very simple reason for that. Many people don't even know, or rather, it's not that they don't know. People always say, oh yes, the compound interest effect. It plays such an enormously important role, but sometimes you really have to anchor it in your mind. What does it actually mean? I'll just use my own portfolio as an example now based on the data. You can run the numbers with your own portfolio. We now have a starting capital of 74,608, 48 euros and 98 cents, or let's just take an even sum, 75,648 euros. We have a dividend yield, indeed, from that time. Let's just do a quick calculation. Let's just assume the growth I've invested in. So from my invested capital, that would bring us to 4,139 euros and 76 cents, what I just received. For 2025, and we have divided by 71,089 euros and 43 cents, I currently have a personal dividend yield of 5.82%. We have a monthly savings rate of 800 euros. As I said, everyone can do this for themselves, and I would simply leave a maximum dividend yield of 3% in there. That's roughly what usually happens anyway. When it comes to price growth, yes, I would say that usually it's between 3 and 7%. Here we're starting from 5%. Everyone can also handle the tax on dividends for themselves. And then you simply have a time period in years here, and dividends are reinvested after taxes. Now let's say 10 years again. I mean, normally you also invest with a long-term time horizon. Can I start playing snowball simulation here? After 10 years, his portfolio is expected to be worth 171,812 because the net dividend in the last year of the simulation is 8,661 euros, 722 euros per month. Exactly. So, as I said, the net dividend, not the gross dividend. Yes, and then you simply have a computer like this here so that you don't lose the motivation to invest continuously. Let's just go ahead with a smaller amount now. Let's say 10,000. I'll just assume a dividend yield of 5%. Share price appreciation of 5%. Dividend growth. Let's leave it at that as well. Let's set the monthly savings rate at 300 euros. And let's just use a period of 20 years now. And after 20 years, you would have 311,383 euros with a nice dividend of 1,498 euros per month after 20 years. And I just want to get that across as a wake-up call. Yes, it sounds small at first, but over time it really adds up tremendously. And you can always decide for yourself whether you want to reinvest the dividends. And you can also always invest in sectors where the share price might currently be undervalued. That's just what I want to show with this wake-up call, that in the long run, it's always possible. As I said, and as I've also written on my YouTube channel, this is it's not a Lambo strategy, it's simply a completely normal long-term strategy. Here I even have a shipping cash flow calculator. For those who want to calculate it very specifically, because shipping, especially when they're making a lot of money, is simply a cash flow machine. You have to be clear about that. Here, you can select the current daily rates, then the OPEX, then the number of ships the company owns, and the utilization rate. And then you can also specify how many shares from the links. This is optional, you don't have to enter it. But you have a payout ratio of 80, and a utilization rate of 95%. Let's say we have 20 ships, and for OPEX, let's assume 10,000. As I said, of course, you can easily calculate this yourself, depending on what kind of charter rate it is in general. Let's just take 30,000 now, and this is simply to give you an idea. Break-even TCE at 10,000 profit per day, fleet 83,000 euros, and annual profit. It's just meant to standardize things a bit. When does the shipping sector actually become straightforward? Very much in the black. Where might there be special dividends, for example, if someone has a quarterly report and wants to calculate something? Yes, I've built in a few small calculators for you here. Everything is always linked. As I said, my goal is to show people that investing is not a short-term strategy in that sense, but rather a long-term wealth-building process. At least that's simply what my strategy is as well. And I know that sometimes I have to tie up my capital for a longer period or simply have a clear strategy for how to proceed. That's the current state of things. As I said, this is not investment advice. I'm happy to receive a comment from you and of course a like as well. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want more. If you want to see portfolio updates and other strategies as well, like I said, I'm generally in the hard asset sector. Why is that? Because hard assets are protected against inflation, dividends are usually adjusted for inflation as well. And, well, it's simply an asset that can't be printed. It simply has intrinsic value and ultimately it's something that's always needed. And that's why for me, the hard asset strategy is the one I've chosen. Of course, that's just a very brief explanation of why I do it this way. Maybe I'll go into more detail about it at some point in the future. So I'd like to say thank you very much for watching. I wish you successful investing, and I look forward to welcoming you again in the next video. Until then.